with changes. And I think that's why I really have devoted my career to helping businesses figure out, well, what do they need to do to, remain competitive, to remain a great place to shop. At the end of the day, it comes down to whether the shopper's going to walk in your store and buy something.
Yeah.
A shopper doesn't owe you a purchase. You have to earn a purchase.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm really on a mission to help businesses figure out how to earn the purchase.
Yeah. One question to leave us with. As planners, we actively try to promote mixed income development and mixed use development. A lot of times, and we do that is because we like to generate that sense of community and street activity. Usually when we promote that, particularly when we're talking about a housing development, we usually say, well, let's put some ground floor retail there. How do you feel about that strategy? Does it always work? And if that's not always the right strategy, what other ways can we look at making the ground floor and sidewalks more active?
Mm-hmm. So I thank you for this question. If you think about the streets that you love walking down, are they always retail streets?
True.
You walk down a street in Brownstone, Brooklyn, and you've got wonderful, tree coverage and, you're walking with your dog or your child and it's a lovely walk, right? I think the premise that ground floor retail is what activates a street or makes it comfortable to walk down is a false premise. I think we should demand of ourselves as planners and of the planning profession to get the residential street right so that it's a lovely experience. And I think we know how to do that. Come on. We live in the city of New York.
Yeah.
You go to the Upper West Side. The minute you walk off of Broadway, there's no commerce. No one's complaining about that.
Exactly.
So I don't understand why we seem to think that we need to put retail everywhere. And the fact is, we can't put retail everywhere. There isn't sufficient demand to support all the retail that, for whatever reason, we think needs to be on the ground floor. And, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart because sitting on the City Planning Commission, we've had a number of rezonings that have come before us. And my concern has always been, and I've said this publicly, why are we overzoning for retail? And the response, and actually, the way the zoning code in New York works, it's not retail, it's commercial on the ground floor. So it could be office space, it could be retail. It's just not residential. And so we just had a rezoning come before us for Sherman Creek, for the Inwood rezoning, which included Sherman Creek. And Sherman Creek is an area that is fairly isolated from the city, and I hope I don't get the details wrong here, but there was an overlay, a non-residential requirement, that's what it was, a non-residential requirement for a major section of that entire area, which was isolated, which even under, full build scenario where they had, a number of new housing units, wouldn't be able to support a ton of retail. So I said, what are you doing? Why are we, preventing residential from going on the first floor when we need housing in the city?
Yes.
And the response was, well, we really want to activate the street. I said, well, how do you activate a street when a space is going to be vacant?
Yeah.
And the response was, well, if we put residential there, it's never going to become retail, which we all know that, over time, that's simply not true.
Yes.
You can go to communities that used to be residential and Jackson Heights is a really good example. You walk down 75th Street, used to be a residential street.
That's where I walked up and I was amazed at the adaptive reuse
right?
that was taking place.
These used to be homes. They're now doctors' offices. It's just simply not true. Over time, we can't change those things. But, so I asked the question, I said, tell me how you can justify putting this much commercial space in this location. And the response we got from the city, and, this was EDC, they said, well, the city had done a study, a leakage analysis, and found that, $200 million of spending leaves the neighborhood every year. And so I study retail. I know that figure doesn't mean anything absent context. $200 million of leakage, and when I looked at the data that they were referring to, a big chunk of that demand was in gasoline stations.
Oh, wow.
So, because that's how retail leakage is, retail leakage includes gas stations. Okay, none of that space is going to go to gas stations, so let's cut that.
And that's not intuitive when you think about it.
No. So I said, let's cut that out. That's $60-70 million. Okay, now we whittle it down. What's left? Apparel, general merchandise, things that you generally don't buy at the neighborhood level. It is very normal for people to leave their neighborhood to shop for apparel and shoes and jewelry someplace else.
Sure.
Okay, let's cut that out. We start whittling that $200 million, and anyway, that $200 million that they were referring to also referred to a much larger area than just Sherman Creek. It referred to the entire neighborhood. So, you start whittling this
Over
down.
100,000 people suddenly.
Yeah. You whittle this down and you have nothing. You have what is effectively no leakage. But, the lack of understanding of what that number means, I think, is really problematic. And I've gone to other communities. I was in Newark. We were doing work in the South Ward in Newark, and the mayor was touting a similar figure around leakage in the South Ward. And I can pull those figures, and it's a very similar exercise.
Sure.
Well, let's look at how much of that is for gas stations. Let's start backing out of a figure. And so I think it's imperative, and especially since a lot of the spending these days is not in a brick and mortar store, it's going to happen online. A certain percentage of spending is going to happen online. So it shrinks our ability to support brick and mortar even more. And so I think we have to push ourselves to decrease our reliance on ground floor is where retail should go, or our assumption that that's how cities should be designed. No, I think we need to really think about how to make sure we design great streets that are residential streets. We know that you can do it.
Yeah, it's not always copy and paste.
Yeah, it's about setting back a building so that there's a landscaped area, raising the first floor so that the window isn't at the ground floor. We have examples all around us of wonderful places, and you live in Sunnyside, and so you know that there are wonderful residential streets. There are examples all over the city. I still can't quite get my head around why we have a problem designing residential streets, or why that somehow is not as good or better than a retail street, when we might very well be building ourselves a problem, which is a vacancy problem over time. I do not want vacant retail. And so this is a little bit of my mission.
That's great. Thank you for that. As we wrap up, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Are there any thoughts you'd like to leave us?
No, I want to thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I hope folks get something out of it.
Likewise. And thank you, Larisa. And thank you for joining us today on another episode of POV. Until next time.